In this lesson, we're going to look at multiplying fractions. Now, one of the main concepts of multiplying fractions is this idea of and times. In mathematics, they mean the same thing. A half of 8 is equal to 4, we should all know that. A half times 8 is also equal to 4. You've done things like that previously in area of a triangle, things like that, half times base times height, halving the number. Now fractions is exactly the same. Of and times mean the same thing. So if you're thinking about what a half of a quarter is and you can get an answer, you can also get the answer to a half times a quarter. So to start with, we'll look at this kind of visually. I've got a rectangle here and I've got a quarter of it, which is this part here. The reason I know that's a quarter of it is because I've had 4 of these bits that would to create the whole, if you like. Now I'm going to half that bit there. So to half that bit there, you'd put a line across right across the middle. But in doing that, if I get half of that, I can see that in the whole shape, I've ended up with 8 bits, if you're talking about 8 equal sized parts. So we can see that half of a quarter, the white bit's the quarter still, but half of that is called an eighth. And if you look at the numbers, there's actually an easy way to get to that if you're doing a times without the picture. And I'll do a few more pictures, but without that, if you do 1 times 1, you're going to get 1. And if you do 2 times 4, you're going to get 8. Right, let's look at a few more kind of picture ideas of this. So here, I've got a kind of browny, kind of beigey rectangle again. I've split it into fifths. Fifths are equal size parts, 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the question is, what's a third of a fifth, or a third times a fifth? A third of a fifth. So if you're looking at a third of a fifth, it would be something like this, wouldn't it? It'd be splitting that into 3, like that, something like that, and maybe another one. Maybe that'd be a bit further over actually. Maybe there. And then another one there. That would be split into 3. Say that, I'm just guessing roughly. But you'd have to do that to every one, wouldn't you? You'd have to do that to these and these and these, and you'd have to think what one of those wee bits would be. So if you look at that there, I've done it over here quickly. So there we go. I've split my fifth into thirds, but I've done it for everything else, and I can see that there's one bit here out of a total of 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So a third of a fifth is a 15th. But again, if you do this idea of the top times the top and the bottom times the bottom, you will get a 15th. And if you continue to do this, then you keep getting the same answer. And then you can do much harder ones without the need for the pictures. This is the last one I'm going to look at with a picture. 3/4 of 2/3. That's kind of what we're looking at here. So 3/4 of 2/3. Now we can see here that 2/3 is kind of there. That would be 2/3, wouldn't it? There's 1/3 and another third and another third. So that'd be 2/3. So if I kind of look at that into this kind of way, if I split the third into quarters, there's quarters, isn't it? But I need to split everything else into quarters. And if I look at 3/4 of the highlighted yellow bit, looking over here, that's there, isn't it? There's 3/4 of that. Now what have I got? Well, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 white bits out a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I've got a 6 out of 12. Now you could simplify that to a half, couldn't you? Because if you've got this white bit here, 6, and then you've got another 6 on the other side of the brown bits, that's kind of half, isn't it? So this worked with even a kind of more complex example, top times top and bottom times bottom. So we get to the idea where we don't actually need the diagrams anymore. If we follow this kind of idea here, top times top and bottom times bottom, we can get our answers. Now I'll do that with these first two, and then I'll look at some harder examples and show you how to do them as well. Now calculate each of these, leaving your answer in its simplest form. That's the lowest value it can take, so always remember to try and do that. Right, so let's just look at this. Instead of thinking about a picture, if we just do top times top, 1 times 4, and 2 times 9, we'll get 4 over 18. Now that's not the simplest form, because the top and the bottom there divide by 2, so you're going to end up with 2 over 9. Okay, let's try the next one. If we do top times top, 3 times 8, which will give you 24, and 4 times 9 is 36. Again, you want to try and simplify that. Now you could half it and go to 12 over 18. You could divide by 4 and go to 6 over 9. But actually the biggest number they both divide by is 12. And you'll get 2 over 3. Now I'm going to show you a wee trick to sort this simplifying bit out, because this can be a bit annoying, this simplifying bit, especially when we get big numbers as well. And the top times top and bottom times bottom can become a bit harder as well. Look at these ones, but there's a way you can simplify at the start to make the fraction much easier to do. Now what you'll notice is I've highlighted these kind of numbers diagonally from each other, the top with the bottom, because when you're simplifying, you simplify the top and the bottom, don't you? So what you can do here is diagonally you can look for things that divide into these numbers, i.e. are they in the same times table. Now we can see that 10 and 30 are in the same times table. So before we times top and bottom times bottom, let's try and simplify these first, because that's the top of the fraction and that's the bottom of the fraction. So they both divide by 10, don't they? So let's do that. So what you tend to do is we put a wee line through it, divide it by 10 and write our answer at the side. And the same down here, put a wee line through it, divide it by 10 and put your answer at the side. Now what you notice with the 13 and the 26 also is they both divide by 13. Two 13s make 26. So let's do the same idea. If we divide them both by 13, that will become 1. And if we divide that by 13, that will become 2. Now this is much easier because I can now do top times top and bottom times bottom with our new numbers, the new wee numbers at the top and the wee new numbers at the bottom. Yeah, that's just 1 times 2 and 1 times 3, that's 2/3. Okay, let's look at that idea again. Now it doesn't always work. Sometimes you'll find that, like for example, the 3 and the 2, they're not in the same times table, so you can't simplify them. But what you notice here is the 5 and the 25. Well, they're in the 5 times table. Let's divide them first. So let's divide that by 5, get 1. Divide that by 5 and get 5. Again, do top times top, so it's 1, the new number here is a 1 times 3 and 2 times 5. Okay, so 1 times 3 and 2 times 5, well that's just 3 over 10. Okay, a couple more examples to finish off. So, I'm noticing that 7 and 28 are in the same times table. They're in the 7 times table, well divide them by 7. That becomes 1, that becomes 4. 9 and 18, they're also in the 9 times table. That becomes 1 division by 9, and that becomes 2. And let's just multiply the top numbers and multiply the bottom. Top times top and bottom times bottom. Now what you'll notice here is you get 2 over 4, which you can simplify again to 1 over 2. And you could do that here, I suppose. You could score out the 2 and put a 1 and score out the 4 and put a 2. Right, let's look at this last case. A wee bit tricky because there's 3 fractions. However, there's a couple of ways to do this. I'm just going to look at the 4 and the 16 and the 5 and the 10 because they're in the same times tables. The 4 and the 16 are in the 4 times table. Well, let's simplify those first. So divide the 4 by 4, you get 1. Divide the 16 by 4, you get 4. Let's look at the 5 and the 10. They're in the 5 times table. So that's going to give you 1 when you divide by 5. And that's going to give you 2 when you divide by 5. So now what you can do is you can do the top line 1 times 2 times 2 and the bottom line 1 times 4 times 5. Now I'm just going to work that out. 1 times 2 times 2 is 4 and 1 times 4 times 5 is 20. But what you could do is, I suppose you could cancel the 2 and the 4 down here. That would become a 1, that would become a 2. That would be another way of doing it. But anyway, What you can do here is you can just simplify that, just divide by 4 and divide by 20, and you're going to get, sorry, divide by 4 on the top, divide by 20, 20 by 4 on the bottom, you're going to get 1/5 to finish off.